Hello and welcome to this short presentation on the Agrikore blockchain. Prior presentations already demonstrated the blockchain and the manner in which it was implemented, the transactions that take place between the various players on the blockchain, and the reserve-backed system, and those were demonstrated on the test network, which is currently live, so you can check this channel for some of those presentations. This presentation delves more into the principles behind how this blockchain was customized and implemented for the agricultural community, the programmable assets behind the community, and the advantages and merits it has for the community to enhance trust between the various players in the community and potentially increase agricultural productivity. And we also introduce a new paradigm which we call process decentralized verification, or decentralized verification of processes. And this new paradigm increases the fidelity of processes by reducing the chances of the process to be compromised. We're going to see some of that in this presentation. First, we look at some of the properties of the blockchain that makes it more trustable than what currently exists. One of those is the fact that blockchain transactions are immutable, and we'll describe how that happens with this demonstration of how blockchains are formed. Starting with a blockchain that has various accounts on it, let's just say 3 accounts, for example. The blockchain has a hash, which is its signature. And this signature basically is an encryption of everything that is on the blockchain. If one single thing changes within this blockchain, the signature will change. A hash is a unidirectional encoding that when it's applied to data, no matter how big the data is, results in a unique value. If you took all the books in a library and all the letters and words in there and you hash it, you get one unique hash value. If you change anything within that entire library, one single letter, the resulting hash of the entire library will be different. And from this hash, you cannot go backwards and determine what the contents are. So a hash is a one-directional encryption tool that ensures that if anything changes in the content that was hashed, the hash becomes invalid. And now, the way blockchains work is the blocks are written at some interval. For Agrikore, this is about every 5 seconds. So within 5 seconds, when new transactions have been submitted, they get added to the next block. And when they're added to the next block, the hash of the prior block is included with the content of the new block, the new transactions that have been added, and creates a new hash. And what that means is if anybody goes back in history and changes or tries to change any of these transactions to change this block, the hash that will be computed from the altered block will be different, and they will serve as witness that this block has been tampered with, and so all the block will be rejected. So that makes blockchains immutable. And so this is one property that increases trust within the system, because a farmer is able to know that if they receive a receipt and it shows on the blockchain, then they will not find out days later that that receipt is invalid, because it's always going to still be there in those prior blocks. In this example here, this account 4234 pays $200 within the last 5 seconds to the second account, and those new transactions are added on the blockchain, converted into a hash, hashed with the prior block's header, and creates a new hash, and this is a new block, and it goes on like that, and that's why it's called the blockchain. But the key thing is blockchain have properties of immutability in the manner in which they are written, because changes to anything in the history will invalidate the entire block, so it cannot be done. A second thing is decentralization. Blockchains are hacking resistant. They are difficult to compromise because they're decentralized. What that simply means is that there are many nodes and they're disconnected, independent nodes that process transactions on the blockchain. And what if a hacker or someone with a bad intention decides to go after this network to maybe change or alter a transaction, a future transaction, if they compromise this one block, then they'll have to compromise all these blocks because each of these nodes have the same copy of this ledger. And by the time they finish compromising maybe half of the nodes, new nodes might have been added to the network. And so blockchains are very difficult to hack, and Bitcoin is an example. While banking processes already accept some measure or threshold of potential compromise that will happen to transactions, blockchains do not have that. They're very difficult to hack and compromise because they are all independent, and they are sometimes even located in different parts of the world. And sometimes nobody even knows all the list of the nodes at any point that is going to be processing transactions. So that is another property of blockchains. And with Agrikore, in addition, nodes on the blockchain have a stake in the blockchain because Agrikore is a reserve-backed system. So any node that joins the network has to actually include some amount. They have to bring some amount into the network, and that goes into the reserve, as shown in prior presentation. And what that means is even a node does not have an interest in hacking the network, because if they do, they basically simply compromise their own stake on the blockchain if the blockchain's value goes down by virtue of the fact that there's a compromise on it. And one of the other features in Agrikore is that nodes are not allowed to process some total of transactions in a day that exceeds how much they have staked in the reserves. Then, one other thing about the Agrikore network is that in general, whenever you have less use of cash, chances of compromise of a system reduces. Because when you give cash, use cash in a society, it is easier to subvert that process and not basically deliver on the agreement behind that cash exchange. When blockchain transactions are used, apart from the fact that they're immutable, the first step is they're actually recorded. So the fact that the Agrikore introduces a more cash-free transactions between farmers and entities, all entities on the blockchain, reduces the chances of agreements and processes between players on the blockchain to be compromised. So it increases trust. And already in the Cellulant community that currently use the Ting application that Cellulant has developed, many of the farmers have mobile applications, mobile devices that have the app on it, and they make payments and receive payments with that. And that is going to be the direction in which more of the processes will be moved onto, where there's less use of actual cash and more use of the blockchain transactions on the blockchain that are recorded in mobile devices. The second aspect of the Agrikore blockchain is that it relies a lot on programmable assets. Money that is represented as programmable assets on the blockchain have some unique and new interesting features that old money or even cash could never have, because now the money can be made to be smart. It can have limitations and restrictions and constraints on how it can behave. It can do things. It can trigger transactions. It can trigger reviews in a way that old money that was previously either in physical cash or even just electronic money that was not on the blockchain could not do. And Ethereum was one of the first few blockchains to introduce that concept, where you could actually write programs on how those assets could behave. Now, for instance, in the old way, when, let's say, this farmer was delivering some crops to an off-taker, and the off-taker promises to pay them after selling this in the open market or to a commodity buyer, and the farmers concerned about getting paid maybe in a week or 2 weeks' time, asks for a piece of paper signed as a promise, so they could at least show that or tender that to someone somewhere, maybe a court, and hopefully enforce that payment. But now the new paradigm should be just put it in the code, and the code right now exists on the blockchain, so that now that code not only just serves as a proof or receipt for this player receiving the produce from the farmer, but it actually, as we'll see in the next slide, enforces those terms. And when blockchains have contracts or agreements that are enforced also by the same medium, the blockchain, on which those agreements are written, those contracts are referred to as Ricardian. And with Ricardian contracts, parties involved in the transactions feel a lot more comfortable because they know that they do not need to just place their trust in the other party. They do not need to bother about arbitration or some other means of getting the terms enforced, because the medium by which the agreement is being made also enforces the terms. And we're going to look at some of the way Agrikore makes agreements between the various players in the community more Ricardian. In Ricardian agreement, as explained before, the same code that set up the agreement also sets up the enforcement terms. And